Things are about to get parabolic. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today we're going to talk about using a parabola as a design tool. Yeah, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but that's what we're going to do. And we're going to use this blank to get started. Now let me tell you a little bit about what I'm talking about. Well, when we design a bowl, we can do everything from a straight-sided 90-degree bowl to a half of a circle to closed rim bowls, to all sorts of different shapes. We can even do ones that are 45-degree angles out. But one of the most pleasing designs, in my opinion, and of course this is all based on your own opinion. You may have a preference and that's fine, but I'm going to share with you the type and the style of bowl that I really enjoy a lot, and that's a parabolic shaped bowl. Now, what do I mean by parabolic? Well, if you've ever seen a parabola is essentially an arcing, waving curve. If we take a section of that parabola and cut it off, what we're looking at are angled walls with a subtle gradual curve. It's making this really gentle curve and then going back down the other side. And that's what I mean by using a parabolic shape. And that's what we're going to do with this particular bowl blank. Now, this is hickory, and this is a little bit deeper than I'm probably going to make the final bowl, but that's good. I'm going to make the foot a little bit higher on this. In the event that this wood shifts, which this has been sitting for quite a while, we're going to just once turn this. So I'm not going to try twice turn this. And this is quarter sawn wood, which means this is half of a really large slab. The pith area, which is, let me get this right. Yeah, the pith was over here. That pith area has been removed. And what happens with that is this essentially is only going to do a little bit of contraction, very small, compared to if we use a smaller log, which is going to do a curved contraction. But that's a whole other issue. I'm not expecting a lot of movement with this particular blank. So we're going to once turn this, but I'm going to leave that foot high because what will happen is this piece will probably shift just a little bit and the foot will have a little teeter in it. If I leave that base or the foot a little bit high on it, I'm able to bring that back and sand it and make it nice and flush once it completely dries. I'm constantly asked, how long does it take that bowl to dry if you're just once turning it? Well, there are a number of variables that come into account, and there's too many for us to cover here. That's why I have the Treatable Understanding Green Wood course that you can check out, and I highly recommend checking that out. We cover all the details there. But this is going to be turned relatively thin, and you might be surprised. This will only take a few days to a week or so before it's completely equalized to its environment. Now remember, wood is never 100% dry. Even if I were to turn this and fast forward 200 years in the future, it's not dry. It's holding moisture of some sort based on the environment that it's in at all times, and that's true of anything that's made of wood. So you have to keep that in mind as well. We want to equalize it to its current environment. So again, there's a lot of details for that. Check out that course. I think you'll like it. So I'm going to turn a parabolic shaped bowl from this blank. I'm going to get this on the lathe and get started.
Okay, I'm going to mount this between centers with my 4-spur drive center and the tailstock. Just going to bring that up, and we're going to tighten this up. It's a good thing to keep in mind that we really need to check that tailstock and make sure this stays nice and snug. As I start turning, I'm vibrating that blank, and it will have a tendency to start coming loose in either the headstock or the tailstock or both. So you want to pause and check that tailstock and make sure it's nice and tight. Now I'm using my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge here, and I'm going to start shaping the outer curve of this just to remove material. I like doing this particular 45-degree cut because I'm truing up the side and the face of this all at the same time. Now the side is a little out of balance. The cylinder could have been cut a little bit cleaner on the bandsaw, but it wasn't, so that's not a big deal. We'll straighten that out here in just a second. There you can see the gap next to the bowl gouge where there's high spots and low spots. We're just going to even that out and true up this cylinder. if you get a big enough difference between the low spot and the high spot, that low spot can act like a ramp and kick the bowl gouge out. That's something to keep in mind. You want to apply down pressure on the bowl gouge into the tool rest. That way you get a nice, stable, even cut. And one thing you don't want to do is use your hands or arms to move the bowl gouge. The bowl gouge is being held by your hands and arms, obviously, but you really want to keep your arms tight up against your body, and you want to keep your hands stationary and just shift your body weight. That way you'll get a nice smooth cut across the tool rest. Okay, I'm going to switch over to my 1/2" 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, and I'm going to clean up the face of this blank. It's always a good idea to do this. It's seldom that you're going to have a perfect blank, especially if you've cut this yourself with a chainsaw and bandsaw. There's going to be rough surfaces there, so it's always good to true those up. I'm going to use my dividers to mark the tenon, and then I'll continue removing material to form the tenon and the shoulder for this bowl. Now the parabola is really interesting and very pleasing to our eye because it mimics a lot of things in nature. There are a lot of curves that are parabolic versus perfectly cylindrical or other shapes that we could come up with. It is a very natural flowing, simple shape that is something that is seen often in nature. We also use the parabolic curve when we're doing an ogee bowl. An ogee is where the bottom shape of the bowl will curve up at the rim and curve back on itself, and it has a lot of reminiscence of that parabolic or the waveform. Got a little kickback there, wasn't quite on the edge there. I'm using my spindle detail gouge here to create the angled dovetail for the tenon. And now I'm going to start shaping the bowl. Now we still have a lot of material to remove. It's essentially, I'm removing at about a 45-degree angle. Now, if I just continued the shape that I'm doing right here with this 45-degree angle, we would have basically a partial cone-shaped bowl. And that's not what we're looking for right now. There's nothing wrong with doing a bowl like that, but that's a different shape that we're going to do maybe at a different time. But right now we're going to do a parabolic curve. So if you think about it, there's probably, I'm sure there's mathematicians out there that can share a mathematic formula that would make sense with this. If you were to plot a series of points on a graph, the curve on the sides of the bowl is going to be more gradual than the curve at the base of the bowl where it comes around. Now, when I'm working the bottom of the bowl here, I really want to be able to see this curve. Even though I know that I can remove more of that shoulder later and form this, I want to visually be seeing this right now. So I'm going to do a backwards, kind of an illegal cut here. This is an unsupported grain cut. And if you're wondering what that means, you might want to check out this video. I've got a video all about supported grain cuts, and it's a simple concept. Once you get it, it can be very confusing at first, but once you understand what a supported grain cut is, it's going to help your turning immensely because you will have much cleaner cuts. And you won't randomly have areas where the end grain looks miserable and you can't figure out why. So check out that video. But that little bit was unsupported. But I visually need to see this undercut angle right here, because I want to start seeing exactly the way the shape of this bowl is going to appear when I'm done. So I want to exaggerate this cutaway area a little bit more. Now, When you're turning, one of the big things is to look at the opposite side where you're cutting. So you don't necessarily want to stare down at the tool itself. See how we're looking at that top edge and that top edge forming? When you're at the lathe, it's a good idea to step back like that and take a look at the shape that you're creating as well. When you're at the lathe, look at the top edge of the bowl as you're creating it. Don't look at the tool. And what'll happen is you'll have a better sense of the overall shape. It's kind of like riding a bicycle. If you were to stare at your feet as you're riding your bicycle, you're probably not going to ride in a really straight line. There's going to be a lot of wobble to that line. However, if you look forward and you maintain your vision forward, you're going to have a nice fluid line as you're riding your bike. Well, the same is true here. So if you watch the top edge of the bowl and how it's being shaped with your actions with the tool, you'll have a much better sense of gathering or putting together the shape that you're looking for. Okay, I'm using a shear scrape here to smooth out the sides of this bowl and to establish this shape. Now it's looking a little odd here at the moment because the top of the bowl is a little higher than what I need as far as material. So I need to remove some of this material. So I'm just going to scrape some of this down. And I'm going to put the top edge of the bowl somewhere about here. So I'm going to get some of this material out of the way so visually I can see exactly what I'm working with. And now we can start to see this parabolic shape a lot better. And I want to further undercut that bottom so that we're really looking down and our eye can visually put together the curve of this shape. Visually, we can see as that side flows down to the bottom of the bowl, we can imagine how that curve is shaped through the foot of the bowl and then how it comes up the other side. Okay, and that's looking really good. I'm going to go ahead and pop this off the lathe and turn it around. We'll start removing the interior. I'm going to put on my 4-jaw chuck. This is a dovetail jaw chuck. I highly recommend using dovetails. They provide a superior grip compared to other chucks, some that have serrated jaws and that. I know there's people that use the serrated jaw chucks and they have really good luck with them. I just do not like them for bowls. They work great with spindles or smaller pieces, but with bowls, you really need a good grip, and the 4-jaw dovetail jaws are ideal for maintaining a really good grip on the tenon of the bowl blank. Okay, so I'm going to remove this waste material here and get this out of the way. The reason this material is being removed is proportionally the diameter of this piece, the proportion of the parabolic curve is dependent on the diameter of the bowl blank itself. And a really tall piece, I could have made it parabolic, but I really wanted this kind of low, simple curve that we have here. I didn't really want this to be a very tall form, more like a vase. I wanted this to be more bowl-like. So working with the diameter that we had, this parabolic shape has a really nice feel to it. So I'm going to remove this material and get it out of the way. I'm using the tailstock. You really want to use a tailstock whenever you can and as often as you can, especially when you're roughing away material. When we rough material out, we typically are being a little bit more aggressive. We're taking deeper cuts, and it's a really good chance to get a catch or to overpower the blank, or the tenon rather, and cause damage to the tenon or dislodge the blank from the chuck. But with the tailstock in place, it really helps prevent that from occurring. So I'm going to whittle this down. Okay, so now I can still use this tailstock because this opening is wide enough. I'm going to bring it back up again, smooth that area out first, and I'll bring that back into place. I'm going to remove some of this center material initially just to help get this out of the way. And again, I'm going to do that while I have the tailstock here. Once I start working the walls and getting a little more precise with the thickness, I really won't be able to have the tailstock in the way. So I'm going to get some of these bigger clearing cuts out of the way right now with the tailstock. Just take your time and make really smooth cuts. That's going to be about as deep as I want to go with the tailstock in place. So I'm going to true up the rim of this. Just make a really light pass on the rim. Then I'm going to start making some cuts that parallel the exterior of the bowl. I'm lining up the bowl bevel, the bowl gouge bevel, with the exterior of the bowl so that they're parallel. And I'm clearing away some material, and I'll work out to what I want to make the wall thickness. It's kind of a visual thing, and I really want that rim to dip down a little bit. Right now is the best time to work that rim. You don't want to clear out the majority of the bowl and then come back to the rim, because you're probably going to have problems. That rim is going to be flexing and moving around a bit, and it could cause some problems if you start playing around out there with not much support on the bowl. But right now we have the core or the center of the bowl in place, and it's actually helping hold those outer walls and keep them in a nice stable rotation. So I'm going to clear away some more material. I've established my wall thickness, and I'm just going to continue that wall thickness all the way down the interior of the bowl. I'm going to work away some of the material in the center. The nice thing about this technique is I'm working both sides of the bowl gouge. Now I am sharpening this gouge pretty frequently. But what's nice about this, I'm using the left side of the gouge right now, and when I'm making the cuts on the inside of the wall, I'm using the right side. So I'm really utilizing most of that sharpened edge each time I come back from the sharpening station. Now, if you're currently using a carbide scraper, there's nothing wrong with that. But to be quite honest, you're going to get a cleaner cut with a bowl gouge. And the bowl gouge allows you to do so many different things that you can't really do very easily with a scraper. If you're intimidated by a bowl gouge, I completely get it. I was there as well. But I have a course called Bowl Gouge Mastery. You might want to check that out. You can go to my website, turnawoodbowl.com/mastery, and you will see that course. You can actually go through all of the different lessons that are in the course. You can check that out. And you can start that course right now if you're interested. It really helps you understand the bowl gouge and gives you the confidence to be able to go ahead and do all of the different moves that you need to do with the bowl gouge. Look at that spalt that's going through there. Unfortunately, we need to make the inside of this bowl a little bit deeper, so that spalt's probably going to disappear. But that's just a beautiful, beautiful spalt. So I'm making light cuts. If you notice, the majority of the top of this bowl, the rim, the wall thickness has already been established. Right about there, it's thick and it's still thick in the bottom. So what I can do is I'm basically rubbing the bevel just gently on the sidewall. Just rub gently, pick up the cut, very light cut, and we gradually increase that cut so it becomes a little bit deeper towards the bottom of the bowl. And we're just sneaking up on that wall thickness so that the bottom of the bowl has the same thickness as the sides of the bowl. There's just a little bit more that needs to come out of there. Also, look how I'm rotating the flute. As I get to the center, I'm closing the flute. So just the edge cuts that piece and just gently severs that last bit. If you push at the center of the bottom of the bowl, you're going to pull out the wood fibers right there in the middle, and it's going to make a little hole. And you really don't want that because it'll be hard to sand out. There's a minor crack on the side of this bowl. It's really not a big deal. I'm going to use some Titebond glue, press that down into the crack, and then sand it with 120 grit sandpaper with the surface grain of the wood. So you can see the surface grain is going left and right. I'm just sanding that left to right, and it cures and dries and is basically cauterized with the sanding, and the dust helps blend in with that. Now the dust is a little bit lighter than that dark area in this particular case, but many times that will almost make the crack completely disappear. So I'm going to sand through the various grits here. Now there's a little trick you can do. The wall thickness of this is relatively thin. It's not super thin where it's super lightweight, but I can also roll over the inside edge like you're seeing right here. And that's going to make it visually appear as if that top edge is thinner than it really is. So I'm going to apply tried and true original finish. This is linseed oil and beeswax. I'm going to apply a coat of this to the bowl. I'm going to let it sit for an hour. Then I'm going to wipe off any excess. And then I'm going to let it sit for 24 hours. And I'm going to burnish it with steel wool. And this is a really wonderful, food-safe, non-toxic finish that I love to use. And look at that wood come to life with that finish on it. It's absolutely gorgeous. And there's some of that spalting again. Absolutely gorgeous. There's a shimmer in the heartwood there. There you can see that. Oh, just love it. So it's been an hour. I'm going to wipe off the excess oil. You do not want to let any thick areas or excess oil sit for any period of time because it will become gummy and it will not cure properly. So you want to make sure that you follow the instructions on the product. Okay, so I'm going to mount a jam chuck to the lathe. I'm going to use a piece of padding. It's just foam padding. And then I'm going to bring my tailstock up right back to where the tailstock was originally so that I can remove the bottom of this and shape the foot of the bowl. Now I'm using push cuts into the headstock again. That's going to create the least problems for us. If I push 90 degrees against the connection, I could have a little bit of an issue, could cause some problems. So it's always nice to do push cuts into the headstock. Here's that 90-degree cut, but see, we're just removing light amounts of material. We're not doing large removals here. So I'm going to remove this area, which was the tenon. Now I could stop here and just have this big, thick base on here. And there would be some advantages to that. It would make this bowl a little bit heavier, so it would sit on a table and have a lot less tendency to fall over. But the big problem with this is that when you leave a thick area, you're going to have a mass of wood that's going to hold moisture in a different way, and it can't release it in the same way that the thinner walls can on the rest of the bowl. So what we really want is we want the foot to have a wall thickness that matches the rest of the bowl. So in theory, there's no area on this entire bowl that is thicker than any other area. So it will release any moisture that's in the wood at the same rate. And that's really why we want to bring all of our wall thicknesses down and make them even. So here you can see I'm making essentially a ring that's going to be the foot of this. And like I said earlier, if this does shift a little bit as it equalizes, then I can simply let it equalize completely and just sand the bottom ring and take off any high spot in that so that the bowl will then seat again flatly on the surface of the table. So I'm using my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back here to remove this little nub, and I'm going to switch over to my spindle detail gouge. The spindle detail gouge is nice for getting into that tight corner there. You really want to work slowly here. You don't want to make aggressive cuts. Just go slow and remove the material. And I'm also forming that inside bottom curve at the bottom of the bowl, which is basically the bottom of the parabolic shape. So we're going to apply forward pressure and turn the lathe off, and it will sever that nub right off of there. Now all we have to do is sand the bottom. I like to take the chuck with the jam chuck in it off the lathe and use that as a support. I've got that pad inside there as well to support this while I'm sanding it. And I'll go ahead and sign my name to it. I like to use the wood burner, and I use a chisel point. Just take your time. If you get the temperature up too high and you scorch it a little bit, you can always come back over this with a finer sandpaper like 180 grit. But there is the finished piece. Look at those beautiful, beautiful grain lines. And the color, absolutely gorgeous. You can see this parabolic shape from inside, but you can really see it from outside. Visually, our eye will complete that curve, and look how nice that looks.
So here's the final piece. I think it has a really pleasing appeal and appearance to it. This really subtle curve that flows through is essentially a parabolic curve. And if you think again about the sine wave, if you have a curve here and then you replicate it, the curve goes up at the top and goes across the bottom. That's kind of what we're looking at. The foot of this has to be a little bit higher so that we visually can, our eye can put this curve together and we can see that curve throughout from one side to the other. We visually put that together. It's also important to cut in so that we can see that curve, and it helps our brain really register that final bottom shape. Obviously we can't see the bottom perfectly. Now I've made this foot somewhat wide. This is more functional. So this bowl can be used, like right now, I can use this for pretty much anything. I don't have to worry about it wobbling too much because this nice solid foot. If I wanted to really emphasize this parabolic curve, I could have made this foot narrower. The narrower I make this, the more ornate this piece is and more decorative. So it's more of a display piece. You pretty much put it on the counter. It's not really designed to be used because it's going to be a little tippy at that point. But this is pretty functional, but it yet still displays that lower curve and helps our eye visually see that curve. The other thing we don't want to do when we do a nice curve like this, this parabolic curve, is we don't want to have a flat bottom. We don't want this foot to be gone. Otherwise, you're just going to see flat, and it's going to be really hard for us to visually imagine where that curve is going to continue through to the side. Keep that in mind when you're shaping your bowls. Now remember, you could shape your bowl any way you would like. This curve is just very aesthetically pleasing to me, and I think a lot of other people enjoy this as well. It might not be for you, and that's totally fine. Remember, do what works best for you. I just wanted to show you how I go about making this parabolic curved bowl. So leave me a comment below and let me know if you're going to make a bowl like this or give this a shot. Also, let me know if you would be interested in a wood bowl turning design course. I'm considering doing a course that's all about designing bowls from all the different shapes that are possible to how to execute those shapes and everything in between. So if you've got any questions about that, or if there's something you would like to see covered in a wood bowl design course, leave me a comment below as well, and I greatly appreciate that. If you've enjoyed this video, do me a huge favor and click that like button. It helps this video, helps the channel, and I greatly appreciate you for doing that. Thank you. Be sure to subscribe if you're not already subscribing, and if you haven't already, check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Over there, I've got everything you need to learn how to turn wood bowls, including online courses that can help you get started fast right now. So go check it out, turnawoodbowl.com. All right, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy turning.